Hey folks, we are back on trail. Today I'm doing another video in my Hammock Camping 101 series. And today I'm going to be looking at tarps. I'm going to show you how I pack my tarp in my backpack. I'll also show you some of the hardware and how I set up my tarp, how I hang it from the trees, as well as go through some different configurations of my tarp, of how I set it up based on the weather. And I'll talk about some of the pros and cons of those different setups. So let's go find a couple trees, hang a tarp. Let's get to it. So I like keeping my tarp in a snakeskin. It helps to easily pack it away, and I have zinget rope which tightens it up so I can easily put this in the back of my backpack. So let me deploy this and show you how I set it up. So this is what it looks like when I first hang my tarp in its snakeskin. A lot of times I'll just leave it that way until I'm ready to deploy it with my other setups. So this is how I hang my tarp from the trees. I use this Dutch wasp is what they call it, and as you can see, it is hooked to the end of my tarp here, almost like a little carabiner. And then I have a zinget rope which is attached to the end of this hook, and that just simply goes around the tree. And then I secure it and I can tighten it up, and then that's not going to move. So I really like this setup. It's really easy for me to hang my tarp. So this is one of the configurations that I use for setting up my tarp, and that's keeping it in the snakeskin. And I'll do this sometimes if I know that it's not going to rain, or pretty confident it's not going to rain. I won't deploy my tarp. I'll just hang it, keep it up just in case that I do need it. But this allows me to have better view of the stars and the surrounding environment around me. So a lot of times when I get to camp and I know that it's going to be a clear evening, pretty low chance of a storm, I'll just hang my tarp like this and keep it in its snakeskin. So that's one way that I will set up my tarp. The first thing I'll do is I'll take off the snakeskin. So the snakeskins just easily slide from end to end, and I just hang them on the very end. And then you see the tarp just begins to unfold a little bit. I have 4 stakes which I use to secure my tarp to the ground, and let me show you how I set that up, and then I'll show you some of the hardware that I use for securing my tarp to the ground. Like I mentioned, I carry 4 stakes with me to pitch down the corners of my tarp, and I have the zinget rope wrapped around my stake. And then what I'll do is my Dutch flea there is attached to an end of some shot cord on my tarp. So that zinget rope, I just simply wrap it around and hook it on there. So again, no need for knots, super simple and quick. And the reason I keep my zinget rope on my stake is that gives me flexibility of moving it around. So now I can pitch my stake tight to my hammock, or I can pitch it wide, because sometimes you don't know, there may be rocks, there may be roots that you're having to deal with. And so having that flexibility of the zinget rope around my stake allows me to kind of pitch it where I can. So this is how I like to have my tarp pitched in case of a bad storm, where there's heavy rains or heavy wind. As you can see, I'm pretty secure in there. The sides are pitched down fairly low. You can even see the silhouette of my hammock in there, that I get complete coverage. And I need to make sure that my tarp is covering on both ends of my hammock. So sometimes there's a little adjustment you have to do, slide it back and forth. But this is what it will look like when I pitch my tarp down low to prevent any rain. And when I mean low, typically I like to have the top of my tarp just above the ridge line of my hammock, because I want to pitch down the sides as low as I can. One of the things that I have to be mindful of is my Zingit rope. So you'll see here my hammock strap is in between the Zingit rope. Because what happens is when I need to pitch it down low, like at the height of my ridge line, my Zingit rope is going to be below my hammock suspension, and therefore I've got to put that in between. Because what will happen if you don't, when you get into your hammock and it starts to pull down, if it's not right, you could easily pull on the tarp and it'll pull it down and it won't be tight anymore. So let me show you on the other side. I don't have it going through the suspension and how that might work. So you can see here my strap is not going through my Zingit rope for my tarp. So if I were to get into this, all of a sudden now I am pulling down, my weight's going to pull down and it's going to pull on that tarp and make it go down. So that's something that you need to be mindful of. Second is how close you pitch your tarp to your tent. So I did this as an example here. You can see on the right side it's pitched down really low and tight, which is good. The only problem that can happen is I've had it where it rains really hard, and what'll happen is a puddle will happen, will be created right underneath my hammock. And as that rain is hitting, it splashes up underneath my hammock, and it'll get my hammock or my underquilt dirty in a heavy downpour if my sides are pitched down too low. So what I typically like to do is pitch out my stakes a little wider. So I'm still having that low coverage. My side of my walls are lower, but if the rain is pounding down, even if there's puddles that's rolling and creating puddles underneath my hammock, at least when it's splattering down right here, it's not going to splash up, or at least minimally it'll splash up on my hammock. So when I am pitching my tarp down low, I like pitching it out a little wider and not too close to my hammock to avoid any splashing underneath. The third thing I don't like, as you can probably see, is that I'm taller than my tarp. And that's a problem just trying to get in and out, right? Getting in underneath the tarp, and especially if you're trying to do any setup here as you're trying to work with your hammock, maybe put on your underquilt. It's just really a pain in the butt because I can't stand straight up. I'm hunched over a lot, and I don't prefer that. So that's kind of a con of pitching your tarp down low. But it's needed, you know. If it's a bad storm, I want to pitch it down low to give me a little more protection. It's just not as easy to get in and out as I'm getting underneath my tarp. It's not as easy to get in and out of the tarp when I do that. But with that being said, if I'm at camp and it's not raining yet, what I'll do is I'll take this side here and I'm going to flip it over to the other side, which will show me or expose the hammock and allow me free access to it. So I'll only keep this pitch down low like this and fully deployed if it is raining. If it's not raining, let me show you what I do and how I set it up. So whether I have it pitched down low or high, when I'm at camp and it's not raining, I like to to take one side of my tarp and flip it over, which will give me more access to my hammock, and so I can sit and lounge in it with better views. So you see what I do is I just use the leftover Zingit rope, and I will tie it down to the other side of that tarp. And that'll keep it in place from flapping around during camp. So what that does is now that gives me free access to my hammock, and it keeps my tarp set up the way I like it. And that's another tip that I do is even if I am not going to deploy my hammock, I will still put my stakes in place. I'm going to act like I'm going to set it up, and then I'll make sure it is set up properly. That's in case if there does a storm come through at night, I can easily go ahead and pitch my tarp down and secure it without having to worry about tightening it and the stakes, getting the stakes out. I can do all that ahead of time. My next setup is what I will typically do when I get to camp. I'll set my tarp up a little higher because I'm not expecting any storms, and it gives me a little more visibility of my surroundings so I can see the mountains or whatever view that I have. So let me show you that setup and what that looks like. This is my typical setup when I get to camp. I like setting my tarp a bit higher. If I know there's not going to be any bad heavy storms, this is what I typically like to do. As you can see, it looks pretty much the same. It's just set a little higher. You can see my stakes are a little further out than they were. And when you come in here, I have a little more room walking around. Plus, another reason that I like pitching my tarp high is that when I'm laying down, I can still see out. When I had it pitched down low, you could see that I couldn't see out as well because the tarp was blocking me because I'm trying to get protection from the rain. So I like this setup as well, especially if I'm not using trekking poles. I'll put my stakes out a little further, and so I'm sitting kind of below my tarp of where it's at, and I have a view of the camp, which is what I like. It's one of the advantages of setting the tarp up high. But again, I'll only do this if I am, if I know that there's not going to be a heavy storm or not. This is how I'll pitch it at night, just to make sure I'm getting the coverage that I need when I'm sleeping in my hammock. One of my favorite setups that I use is I put it in porch mode. So I'll typically hike with one trekking pole and I'll carry another one. And I carry the other one because a lot of times I do like putting my tarp into porch mode. It's a nice little feature, gives you any protection, especially if there's a light rain, you can sit in your hammock. So this is porch mode, which is a very popular setup. As you can see, I had to pull my stakes out. You have to pull them out a little bit further than my typical setup. And then you use your trekking pole, fits right in there into my little end of my tarp. And then I have again my little Dutch wasp hooked on, and I can tighten it as I need it. And this is a fabulous setup for relaxing while you're at camp. So porch mode is one of my favorite setups because I'll have this side still pitched down, which gives me a little protection, and then from here, as you can see, I have pretty good view. So I like sleeping in this mode at times because it gives me that that view of the mountains and the trees and the campsite. What it'll also allow me to do is I can eat here. Like if it starts raining at camp, I can pitch my tarp into this porch mode, and then it gives me a little protection while I'm in my hammock trying to eat. So this is a very, again, this is a very popular configuration for your tarp, is pitching it low on one side to keep you from protection, maybe from the wind, and then putting it in porch mode so you can have a little more freedom underneath your tarp as you're sitting in your hammock. If you're setting things up, or if you're just wanting to relax and you want to have the view, porch mode, I think, is the way to go. I think one of the advantages of hammock camping over a tent is the use of a tarp, because what I have found is that if I'm coming into camp and it's already raining, the first thing I will do is I will set up my tarp, and I'll set it up fairly high so I can move underneath it. And what that allows me to do is then I can put my backpack under there, and I can set up my hammock, my underquilt, everything that I need without getting wet. And I know when I've been tent camping and it's raining, that's one of the things I've always dreaded. I never wanted to get into camp when it was raining, because trying to set up your tent in the rain can be a bit of a problem. You get the inside of your tent wet a little bit. I know there are some workarounds around that. But with the hammock camping, you don't have to worry about that. You just go ahead. If it's raining, you pitch your tarp, you stake it down, and now you're creating a nice dry environment for hanging your hammock. So that's one of the reasons that I love to go hammock camping, and one of the reasons why I will always bring a tarp with me when I go hammock camping. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Those are the tarp setups that I use when I go hammock camping, and it's really based on the weather. If there's bad weather, then I'm going to pitch my tarp down low and tight to have more protection. Otherwise, I'm going to pitch it high and probably in porch mode, just so when I'm lounging in my hammock, I can have a view of the campsite around me. Well, I hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching.